Every fall since I was a kid, I'd made the trip out to my Uncle Ray's place in East Central Kentucky. Uncle Ray would call sometime around November, say something like, "Woodpile's looking thin," and that was the signal. I'd pack up for a long weekend, drive out, and spend a few days stacking firewood, checking trail cameras, and breathing air that didn't smell like pavement. That particular year, he called early. Said he'd messed up his back lifting a beam in the shed and couldn't haul the last of the wood down from the ridge. I got in on a Thursday night. The air had that late November bite cold but not bitter. I slept fine that night but woke early, around 6. By 8, I was packed up and heading up the trail with a canvas bag for kindling, an axe strapped to my back, and an old thermos full of black coffee that Ray insisted on making with a percolator from the 70s. The trail cuts behind the main cabin, then winds uphill for a few hundred yards before leveling out near the tree line. Past that tree line, about 300 yards up, the woods just end, abruptly. It's a weird cut like nature got lazy and decided not to reclaim what's beyond. What's up there are the ruins of an old homestead, a barn, half collapsed, and a stone foundation where a house used to be. Chimneys still standing, but everything else long gone. Just bones now. We never really went up there. Not because of any story or warning. Nothing dramatic, it just didn't come up. The barn was already collapsing when I first saw it as a teenager, and Ray had always just said, "Ain't much worth the climb," if I asked. But I remembered it. The way the roof dipped in on one side. The stubbornness of the structure. Like it was trying not to give in. That morning, I reached the clearing and set my gear down to catch my breath. The hill isn't steep, but it's long, and I hadn't realized how wet the ground still was until I felt my boots sink a little in the soft rot beneath the leaves. I looked at the barn. It had gotten worse. The rear half had caved entirely, but the front wall was holding, barely. You could still make out the shape it used to be. Off to the side, maybe 30 yards away, the house's stone foundation sat quiet. It had that hollow look buildings get when they've been empty long enough to forget people ever lived in them. I wasn't planning to explore. Seriously, I was just going to grab the woodpile and head back. But my wife, Beth, loves these moody, rustic fall photos. Old wood, scattered leaves, that kind of thing. So I figured I'd snap a few pictures before heading back down. I pulled out my phone, took a few from where I was standing, then walked closer to the barn to get a better angle. That's when I heard it. A sound, not loud but enough to stop me. Like someone dragging a foot through the leaves, not quickly. Slow, deliberate. There was weight in it, and it didn't sound like an animal. Animals don't move like that. They skitter, rustle, dart. This was more like someone moving carefully. I froze and waited. The sound stopped. I waited another 30 seconds, maybe more. Then I called out, trying to keep my voice casual. "Hey, just passing through." Nothing. I waited longer, listening. Still nothing. Not even a bird. That part I noticed more than anything, the silence. Like everything around had hit pause. I stepped around the barn slowly. One of the double doors had collapsed inward. The other hung at a bad angle, half off its hinges. I peeked inside. Same clutter I remembered from years ago. Chunks of old farming equipment. Pieces of wood that might have once been a wagon. The rusted curve of a stove sitting near the back. And something else. The leaves on the floor inside weren't flat. They were pulled, disturbed. A path of them, narrow but clear, leading in from the front, across the barn, and stopping just shy of that stove. It wasn't wind. There was no wind. And the way they were moved, no scuff marks, no shoe prints, just leaves parted as if by pressure from above. I put one foot over the threshold, stopped. The smell hit me. Not rot, not mildew, something else. Sharp, almost metallic. Like rusted iron in wet earth with something sour underneath. The kind of smell that doesn't belong in a barn. I backed out, fast, and then, thud. From across the clearing, from the house. Not a crash, not a branch falling. Just a sound like something heavy hitting the floor, then quiet. I turned to look, and everything in me just tensed. Then again, thud, Same rhythm, a pause, another, like someone dropping something heavy, waiting, then doing it again. I stayed still. Then the dragging sound started again, this time from inside the house. It was slower now. Drag, drag, pause, then again. I stared at the doorway, that dark rectangle in the stone. Nothing moved, but the sound kept coming, closer, and I couldn't make myself leave. My legs weren't frozen, just confused, like they couldn't decide which instinct to follow. I said, "You okay in there?" Not loudly, just enough that someone, if someone was in there, would hear. The dragging stopped. Nothing for a few seconds. Then the leaves just outside the doorway shifted. Not a lot, just enough to notice. They pressed down flat, like someone stepped there, but I didn't see anyone. Then another spot, a few feet over, same thing. The leaves depressed slightly, then stayed that way, like something was walking, something invisible or hidden, but still heavy enough to leave a mark. I started backing away. "I'm just leaving," I said, "not here to bother anyone." I turned, then thud, right behind me, closer than it should have been. I ran, no hesitation. I just bolted. The trail was narrow and the leaves were slick, but I didn't care. I slipped once, caught myself on a branch, nearly dropped the axe. My boots kept sliding, but I didn't slow down. Behind me, I swear I heard something. Not chasing, just following, like it wasn't in a hurry, the kind of pace that makes you feel like it doesn't have to rush. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached the equipment shed at the bottom of the ridge. Later, I told Uncle Ray someone might have been squatting up there. I made up a line about seeing signs of activity, tracks, disturbed stuff, maybe some gear. He just nodded and said, "Could be, sometimes folks pass through," but I didn't tell him the real part. I've still gone back every November since, but I haven't been past the shed. I'd taken a contract gig out in eastern Kentucky. A tiny historical society had received some grant money to document old burial sites in the hills. It was already late fall by the time I got there. Most days were uneventful. I'd drive my rental up some gravel road until the tires started sliding, then hike the rest of the way in with a pack, a laminated map, and a handheld GPS unit clipped to my jacket. Other times, I'd find nothing for an hour and suddenly realize I was standing on it. The markers almost gone, the ground subtly sunken. On November 4th, I headed out to a location the society listed as the Bledsoe ground. The only map I had of it was a blurry scan of a courthouse sketch with the plot marked in fading pencil. The last recorded burial had been in 1911. No known descendants, no paved access, just a note saying 2 miles northwest of Hawthorne's barn. That turned out to be a sagging tobacco barn, about 10 miles outside Corville, on a barely there dirt track that my GPS didn't even register. I parked in a patch of reeds, grabbed my gear, and walked in. The first mile wasn't bad. The trail dipped into a hollow, passed a creek twice, then started climbing. The higher I went, the quieter it got. That eerie, padded kind of silence you only hear deep in the woods. No wind, no birdsong. Just my boots and the leaves and the occasional click of the GPS unit trying to keep signal. About halfway up the slope, I found what was left of the entrance. 2 rusted iron posts stood crooked in the ground, barely holding a length of chain that had long since broken. Behind it, a clearing sunken in the middle, like the forest had grown around a memory. I could see 4 headstones from the trail, with more likely buried under the brush. I spent maybe 40 minutes there. Logged coordinates, snapped photos, sketched out the layout in my notebook. Most of the stones were too weathered to read, except for one. A small rounded headstone near the back. It just said, "Mother, 1864. No name, no epitaph. I brushed some lichen off with my sleeve and took a few pictures. That's when I saw something through the trees. To the east, maybe 30 or 40 yards off, there was a figure standing between 2 poplars, perfectly still. I squinted. Looked like a person, tall, maybe wearing a coat, but not moving. At first, I thought it might be a hunter. The area wasn't technically private, but I hadn't seen another person all week. I raised a hand, gave a casual wave. Nothing. I called out, "Hey, just doing survey work, don't shoot or anything." Still nothing. No wave, no shift, no reaction at all. I looked down at my GPS again to double-check coordinates. When I looked back up, the figure was gone. Just trees. No sound. No branches cracking. No leaves rustling. I stared for a while, trying to figure out where they could have gone. It didn't make sense. The forest was thick, but not that thick. I would have heard something if they moved. I packed up and decided to head out. It was getting later than I like to stay out anyway, and I didn't want to navigate those trails after dark. But when I started walking, the path felt wrong. The slope was steeper. The terrain twisted slightly in a way I didn't remember. The creek, which should have been on my right, was now on my left. I stopped, turned around to get my bearings, expecting to see the rusted posts behind me. They weren't there. No clearing. No sign of where I'd just been. I stood still for a full minute, tried to stay calm, pulled out the GPS again. The screen glitched. It flickered once. The battery icon, which had been full earlier, was now blinking red. Then the screen just shut off. I pulled out my phone, even though I knew I had no signal, not even one bar. That wasn't unusual. What was weird was that the compass app wouldn't load, just a spinning wheel. Like it couldn't find me. I decided to head downhill and try to follow the slope out. That usually worked. Most of these ridges drain into the same few creeks. I figured I'd recognize a crossing point or even stumble back onto the road eventually. But after 20 minutes, the forest still didn't look familiar. I came across a narrow ravine I didn't remember seeing on the way in. I crossed it carefully, using a fallen tree as a bridge. On the other side, I saw something through the trees. A shape, a structure. At first I thought it was a shed, or maybe a deer blind, but it wasn't. It was a bus, a full-size school bus, half buried in ivy and leaning slightly to one side, no wheels, resting on cinder blocks. Rust streaked down the yellow paint like tears. The windows were busted out, but the front door was intact. There was no road anywhere near it. No path. Nothing to explain how it got there. I should have left. I should have taken one look and backed away. But I didn't. I stepped up, opened the door, and climbed inside. The air was thick, like something had been trapped in there too long. Most of the seats were gone, just ripped out bolts and torn linoleum on the floor. Only the last 2 rows remained. The walls were covered in carved initials, little hearts, crude drawings. It looked like kids had used it as a hangout spot at some point, but not recently. I walked slowly to the back. That's where I saw it. A woman's coat, dark green, wool, draped neatly over the back of the last seat. Not dusty, not mildewed. It looked clean, almost new, and, on top of it, a folded newspaper clipping. I picked it up. It felt real, old. The paper was yellowed but not brittle. The date at the top read November 9th, 1973. The headline, 3 missing in Little Elkhorn Hollow, last seen near bus wreck. I stared at the grainy photo. Same bus, same dents, same number painted on the side. I turned the clipping over in my hands. The ink smudged where my fingers touched it, and then I heard it. Footsteps. Metal footsteps. Behind me, slow, deliberate. I spun around. Nobody was there. The air felt tighter suddenly, like the space had gotten smaller. I backed out, fast, stepped off the bus and into the trees. The sky had gone darker than it should have been. The sun shouldn't have been down yet, but the forest looked like it was already in shadow. I ran, didn't think, didn't check direction, just ran. Branches whipped my arms. I lost my footing more than once. I just kept going until my legs gave out. Eventually I leaned against a tree, gasping. I pulled out my phone again. The compass worked. North was to my left, which meant the creek should have been that way. I followed it. 15 minutes later, I saw my car. I climbed in and drove. Didn't stop until I was back in Corville. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed to finish the contract, but I never went back north of Elkhorn Ridge.